I was walking down the hallway of my own home on a Tuesday evening in November when I heard my son's voice behind the kitchen door. He was not speaking loudly. That was the first thing that stopped me. David has never been a quiet man. 38 years old, built like his grandfather, the kind of voice that carries across a room without effort. In 38 years, I had never once had to ask him to repeat himself. But that evening his voice was low, careful, the specific kind of quiet that people use when they are saying something they do not want carried. I stopped in the hallway. His wife Claire's voice came next. Clipped, precise. The way she spoke when she was focused on numbers, which was often, because Claire was a financial planner by profession and a careful woman by nature. Or so I had believed. I caught 3 words before I understood what I was hearing. Offshore. Ledger. Untraceable. I stood in that hallway with my hand on the wall and felt something move through my chest that had no clean name. Not quite shock. Not quite grief. Something colder than both. The specific feeling of a man who has just heard a door open onto a room he did not know existed inside his own house. They did not know I was there. I did not move. And in the next 4 minutes, standing perfectly still in my own hallway at 67 years old, I heard enough to understand that the family estate I had spent 41 years building was being quietly, methodically, and very deliberately taken apart from the inside. If you found your way here today, I am more grateful than I know how to say. Tell me in the comments, what city, what state, what country are you joining from? Let us see how far this story travels. Please note, some elements of this story are fictional, crafted to entertain and to teach. Any resemblance to actual names or locations is purely coincidental, but every lesson woven into it was written with you in mind. My name is Edward Hargrove. I am 67 years old. I spent 41 years building Hargrove Property Holdings from a single duplex I purchased at 26 years old with a loan I was not entirely sure I could repay. By the time I was 40, the company owned 14 residential properties across 3 counties in Central Virginia. By the time I was 55, that number was 31. Today, the portfolio is valued at approximately $9 million, not because I was lucky, but because I was disciplined and careful, and I did not make decisions with my ego. My wife Eleanor passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, 9 months from diagnosis to the end. She was 62 years old and the most steady person I have ever known. We had built everything together, which means that since she passed, I have been building alone, which is a different thing entirely. I have 2 children. My daughter Patricia, 41 years old, lives in Richmond with her husband and their 2 sons. She is a high school principal, the kind of woman her mother would have looked at with complete satisfaction. She has never asked me for anything she was not prepared to earn. My son David is 38. He joined Hargrove Property Holdings full-time at 26, the same age I had been when I bought that first duplex. I gave him operational control of the company's day-to-day management 3 years ago when my knee replacement slowed me down more than I was prepared to admit. He had earned it. He was thorough and hardworking, and I trusted him the way a man trusts someone he has watched for 38 years. He married Claire Ashton 7 years ago. Claire was 31 when they married. Sharp, composed, excellent with numbers. She had her own financial planning practice that she folded into a supporting advisory role with the company after the wedding. At the time, it had seemed natural, efficient, the kind of arrangement that made sense for a family business. I had liked her. I want to say that clearly before anything else. I had genuinely liked Claire Hargrove. She was good company at dinner, and she made my son happy in the specific way that is visible from across a room. I had never once in 7 years had a reason to look at her more carefully than that. Until a Tuesday evening in November when I heard the word offshore spoken quietly in my own kitchen by my own son's voice. Let me take you back to that hallway. It was the 3rd Tuesday of November. I had come for dinner, which I did every other Tuesday, a habit Eleanor and I had established years ago, and which none of us had seen any reason to stop after she was gone. David cooked, or Claire cooked, or someone ordered from the Italian place on Route 15 that Eleanor had loved. We ate at the dining room table and talked about the properties and Patricia's boys and whatever was in the news that week. That evening I arrived at 6:15, 15 minutes earlier than usual because I had misjudged the traffic. The front door was unlocked, which was normal. I let myself in, which was also normal. I set my coat on the rack in the entryway and walked down the hallway toward the kitchen where I could hear voices. Halfway down the hallway I slowed. The voices were too quiet. I am not a man who eavesdrops. I want to be clear about that. I spent 41 years running a business on the principle that if something needed to be said, it should be said to the right person directly. Hallway conversations are not my nature. But something stopped my feet before my mind caught up with why. David's voice, low and deliberate. The Cayman account is funded through the third-party LLC. Nothing traces back to the holding company directly. That is why we need the second transfer completed before the year-end audit. Claire's voice. The transfer from the estate fund? The same one. 40,000 this quarter. Same as last. She paused. Your father reviews the summary reports, not the line items. He will not see it. A silence. Then David again. And the total? Claire's voice was precise and completely without hesitation. 480,000. Across 11 transfers. 14 months. I stood in the hallway. My hand had found the wall again without me telling it to. My chest was very still in the way a room goes still before a storm. That specific suspended moment when everything is about to change and the air knows it first. $480,000. 14 months. 11 transfers. From the estate fund. My estate fund. The door at the end of the hallway pushed open and Claire came through carrying a dish towel, already talking over her shoulder to David about the pasta water. And she looked up and saw me standing in the hallway. Her face did something in that moment that I have thought about many times since. It did not crumble. It did not go pale. It did something far more revealing than either of those things. It went absolutely, completely, deliberately still. The expression of someone who has just understood the full scope of a situation in under 1 second and is already managing it. Edward, she said warmly, with a smile that arrived perhaps a half-second too late. You're early. We didn't hear you come in. I know, I said. My voice came out completely even. Come in, sit down, she said, gesturing toward the dining room. David is just finishing the sauce. Thank you, Claire, I said. I sat down at the dining room table. I unfolded my napkin, and I made the decision that would take everything I had to keep for the next 6 weeks. I stayed for dinner. All of it. The pasta, the bread, the conversation about the Millbrook property renovation and Patricia's youngest soccer tournament, and the weather forecast for the coming week. I asked reasonable questions and gave reasonable answers and did not once, not for a single visible moment, give either of them any reason to believe that anything had changed. David poured me a glass of wine. Claire laughed at something I said about the renovation contractor. I drove home at 8:45. I sat in my driveway for 7 minutes before going inside. Then I went to my study, the room Eleanor had always called my thinking room, and I sat at my desk and I took out a yellow legal pad and I wrote down exactly what I had heard. Every word I could recall. In sequence. With the time I had heard each piece noted in the margin. $480,000. 11 transfers. 14 months. Cayman account. Third-party LLC. Year-end audit. I looked at those words for a long time. Then I wrote one more line at the bottom of the page. They have been doing this since before Eleanor died. I do not know why that particular thought arrived first. Something about the timeline. 14 months. Eleanor had been gone for 4 years, but the company had been in transition for longer than that. Claire had been advising on the financials for 6 years. I sat with that thought until it became something I could carry without letting it show on my face. Then I picked up my phone and called my daughter. Patricia answered on the second ring. Her voice was warm and slightly distracted the way it always was in the evenings when the boys were still awake. Dad, everything okay? I need to ask you something, I said. And I need you to answer me honestly. Of course. Her voice shifted. What is it? Have you noticed anything unusual about the company financials in the last year? Anything David has mentioned? Anything that seemed off in the quarterly reports? A pause. A long one. Dad, she said carefully. Why are you asking me this tonight? Because I heard something this evening that I cannot unhear. I said, and before I do anything else I need to know if I am the only one who has been kept in the dark. Another pause. Then Patricia said, her voice dropping to something quiet and careful. I noticed the distributions were lower last year than the projections. I asked David about it in August. He said it was a cash flow adjustment for the renovation schedule. I accepted that. She paused again. Should I not have accepted that? No, I said. You should not have. I heard her exhale slowly on the other end of the line. What did you hear, Dad? I told her. The silence that followed was the kind that happens when someone who loves you understands fully, all at once, the shape of something that has been happening around you without your knowledge. Her voice when she spoke was very quiet and very steady. What do you need from me? I need you to trust me for a little while, I said. And I need you to say nothing to David. Not yet. Not until I know the full scope of it. She was quiet for 3 seconds. Okay, she said. But Dad. Yes. How long have you known something was wrong? 3 hours, I said. She exhaled again. Okay, she said. I trust you. Tell me what to do. On Wednesday morning, I called a man named Gerald Fitch. Gerald had been my accountant for 22 years before he retired from general practice to do what he called the interesting work, which was forensic accounting. Tracing money that did not want to be traced. Finding the gaps between what financial records said and what the underlying transactions actually were. He was 64 years old, meticulous in the way that only people who genuinely love numbers become meticulous. And he had the rare gift of being able to explain complex financial structures in plain language without making you feel that you should have understood them earlier. Gerald, I said when he answered, I need your help. And I need it to stay between us until I tell you otherwise. He did not ask why. He had known me long enough to know that if I was calling at 8 o'clock in the morning with that particular tone, there was a reason. What do you need? He said. I need you to go through Hargrove Property Holdings' complete financial records for the past 18 months. Every account, every transfer, every line item. I need you to tell me what you find that does not belong. A pause. Are we talking about internal irregularities? We are talking about possible systematic diversion of estate funds through a third-party LLC to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, I said. Gerald was quiet for 4 seconds. Then he said, in the specific tone of a man who has just been handed a problem he finds genuinely interesting, I will need full access to the company's accounting system. Can you arrange that without alerting whoever is responsible? I am still a 51% owner of this company, I said. I can access anything I want to access at any time. I simply have not chosen to exercise that access recently. Another pause. I see, Gerald said. I will need 1 week, he said. Possibly less. These things leave traces that people who are not trained to look for them believe are invisible. They are not invisible. They are simply small. I gave him the access codes that afternoon. He called me back in 5 days. Gerald came to my house on a Monday morning with a laptop, a printed report bound in a manila folder, and the expression of a man who has found what he was looking for and is not pleased about it. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and opened the folder and walked me through it with the methodical patience of someone who understood that what he was presenting was going to hurt, and that clarity was more important than speed. The transfers began 16 months ago, he said. Not 14, as I had heard Claire say. 16. The first 2 were small enough to read as routine administrative adjustments. 2,000, then 3,500. The kind of numbers that disappear inside a quarterly summary without generating any flags. He turned a page. Then they grew. He placed a printed timeline on the table, a clean left-to-right sequence of dates and amounts. Month 3, 12,000. Month 5, 18,000. Month 7, the pattern shifted to quarterly transfers of between 35 and 45,000. He tapped the final entry. The most recent transfer was completed 9 days ago. $42,000. Routed through an LLC registered in Delaware under the name Ashton Advisory Group. He looked at me steadily. Ashton is your daughter-in-law's maiden name. I kept my hands flat on the table. The Delaware LLC lists Claire Hargrove as sole member, Gerald continued. The LLC has a single bank account, which acts as a pass-through. Funds enter from the Hargrove estate account and exit within 48 hours to a private account held at a financial institution in the Cayman Islands. He turned the final page. Total diverted across 16 months, he said. $631,000. Not $480,000. $631,000. The number in the kitchen had been out of date. I pressed my fingers against the bridge of my nose and breathed through it. Gerald waited. There is one more element, he said. Tell me. The Ashton Advisory Group LLC was not formed 16 months ago. He placed a corporate registration document on the table. It was formed 4 years and 2 months ago. I looked at the date on the document. 3 months before Eleanor was diagnosed. Gerald held my gaze with the quiet directness of a man who understood what he was showing me. The account was dormant for nearly 2.5 years after formation. He said, no transactions. Then 16 months ago it became active. I sat with that for a long moment. She built the structure before she needed it, I said. My voice came out very quiet. The infrastructure was in place and waiting, Gerald confirmed. She was patient. I looked at the registration date again. 3 months before my wife's diagnosis. The year Claire had spent at Eleanor's bedside being attentive and warm and indispensable. The year David had leaned on her more than he had ever leaned on anyone. My throat tightened until swallowing took effort. I picked up the folder. I held it in both hands. Then I set it down again with the care you use for things that are now evidence. Gerald, I said, I need one more thing from you. Name it. I need a complete forensic report suitable for presentation to an attorney and to law enforcement. Every transfer, every account, every data, every wire. Documented so completely that no one can question the chain. He nodded once. You will have it by Wednesday, he said. Thank you. I said that he closed his laptop and looked at me across the kitchen table with the expression of someone who wanted to say something beyond the professional. Edward, he said, I have known you for 20 years. I'm sorry. I know, I said. So am I Dr. Patricia Jordan from Richmond, She sat at the same kitchen table that Gerald had sat 3 days earlier, read through the forensic report, focused, careful attention on the woman who understood that every page. When she finished, she closed the folder and sat with her hands folded on top of it and looked at the middle distance for a long moment. Then she said, her voice very controlled, How did David not know? I do not know yet, I said honestly. That is the question I cannot yet answer. Patricia looked at me. Do you think he knew? I thought about my son, 38 years old, hardworking. The voice I had heard in that kitchen had been quiet and deliberate. He had spoken about the transfers with the ease of someone who had discussed them before. I think, I said carefully, that the answer to that question will determine everything that comes next. Patricia nodded slowly. What do? We bring in an attorney first, I said. Everything through proper channels. Nothing confrontational until the legal structure is in place. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Mom would have known what to say right now, she said. My throat tightened. She would have told us to be careful and thorough and to not let the anger make the decisions, I said. Patricia's eyes went bright at the rims. That is exactly what she would have said. I squeezed her hand once. Then I reached for the phone. I had one more call to make. I called an attorney named Susan Caldwell on Thursday morning. Susan had handled the legal work for Hargrove Property Holdings for 15 years and was the sharpest mind in the field of estate and business law that I had encountered in 4 decades of needing sharp legal minds. She listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, she said, Where's the forensic report now? In my possession, I said. My accountant is prepared to testify. Good. She paused. Edward, I need to ask you something directly. Ask. Your son, do you believe he was a knowing participant? I was quiet for a moment. I believe, I said, that I am not yet certain. And I need to be certain before I decide how to proceed. Because if David was manipulated the way I was manipulated, then what comes next is very different from what comes next if he was a willing architect. Susan considered that. Then she said, I recommend we move in 2 stages. First, we secure the estate assets. Account freezes, legal hold on all transfers, revocation of Claire's advisory access to the company accounts. That can be done within 48 hours and does not require confronting anyone directly. And the second stage? We present David with the evidence privately, before law enforcement, before any legal filing that becomes public record. We give him the opportunity to tell us what he knew and when. She paused. If he cooperates fully, the legal exposure looks very different for him. If he does not, then we proceed with everything and the outcome is what it is. I sat with that for a moment. That is fair, I said. It is the right approach, she said, for the family and for the case. Proceed, I told her. Susan moved in 48 hours the way she always moved, completely and without waste. By Friday afternoon, the Hargrove Property Holdings accounts had a legal hold placed on all outgoing transfers above $5,000 pending a forensic audit, which was true and accurate and gave no indication of what we specifically knew. The Ashton Advisory Group LLC was flagged in the Delaware Secretary of State records for a compliance review. A formal attorney's letter was sent to the Cayman institution holding the private account, notifying them of a pending legal dispute over the origin of the deposited funds. Claire would not be able to move the money. The vault was frozen. On Saturday morning, Susan called me. The Cayman institution has acknowledged receipt of the letter, she said. Standard protocol is a hold pending legal review. The funds are not going anywhere. How much is there? After the transfers out, she paused. $614,000. Some disbursements were made. We are still tracing where they went. I exhaled slowly. And David? Sunday, Susan said. We do this Sunday. In person. At your house. I want Patricia there, I said. Agreed, she said. And Edward, be prepared for the fact that whatever he tells you, it is going to hurt. Either answer hurts. I know, I said. I have been prepared for that since Tuesday evening. David arrived at my house on Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock. I had called him Saturday night and told him I needed to go over some estate planning matters. Nothing alarming in my voice. Nothing unusual. Just a father asking his son to come by on a Sunday the way fathers do. He came alone. He walked in carrying a jacket over one arm, the comfortable ease of a man coming to his childhood home on a Sunday afternoon. He looked at Patricia sitting in the living room, and his expression shifted slightly. Curious, not alarmed. What's going on? He said. Is everything okay? Sit down, David, I said. He sat. I placed Gerald's forensic report on the coffee table between us. I placed Susan's legal summary beside it. And then I sat across from my son, and I looked at him the way I had looked at him his entire life. Directly. Without flinching. I need you to read these, I said. And then I need you to tell me what you knew and when you knew it. David looked at the folders on the table. He did not reach for them immediately. Something moved across his face that I had spent 3 decades learning to read in my son. Not guilt exactly. Something more complicated that he picked up the forensic report. He read it slowly. Patricia was very still on the other side of the room. Susan sat quietly in the corner chair with her legal pad. David read for 11 minutes. When he set the report down, his face was the color of old paper and his hands were not entirely steady, and he looked at me with the specific expression I had been dreading and hoping for in equal measure for 3 days. The expression of a man who has just understood something he should have seen much earlier. Dad, he said. His voice broke on the word. Tell me, I said. I knew about the LLC, he said. His voice was very quiet. Claire told me she had set it up as a tax optimization structure, a way to move advisory fees through a pass-through entity. She said it was standard practice for financial planners. He stopped. I did not know about the Cayman account. I swear to you, I did not know about the offshore component. I thought the money was going into a domestic holding account that we would declare at year-end. He pressed his fist against his mouth. She told me it was legal, he said. She showed me documents. I believed her because I did not have any reason not to. His voice cracked. I should have looked closer. I should have asked Gerald to review it. I should have. David. My voice came out rough at the edges. He looked at me. I believe you, I said. The sound he made was not quite a word. Something between relief and grief that had nowhere else to go. Patricia moved from her chair and sat beside her brother and put her arm around him without saying anything. He dropped his head forward and his shoulders shook once, hard, and then he steadied himself the way our family had always steadied itself, with effort and with dignity. What happens now? He said. Susan leaned forward. That depends entirely on you, she said. What you knew, what you can document, and how fully you cooperate with the investigation. She held his gaze. Your father has kept this private until this moment specifically to give you that choice. I suggest you make the most of it. David looked at me across the coffee table. I looked back at my son. Tell me everything, I said. From the beginning. Leave nothing out. He told me everything. It took 2 hours. Claire was served with legal papers on Monday morning. She called David at 9:47. He did not answer. She called 3 more times in the following hour. David sat in Susan's office and let the calls go to voicemail and cooperated fully with everything asked of him. She called me at 11:15. Her voice when I answered was composed in the specific way that people are composed when composure is all they have left. Edward, she said, I think there has been a misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding. Claire, I said. A pause. If you would just let me explain the structure of the advisory account. The account has been frozen, I said. The Cayman institution has been notified. Gerald Fitch's forensic report is in the hands of our attorney. And David has given a full statement. The silence that followed lasted for seconds. When she spoke again, the composure was still there, but underneath it something had shifted. The specific quality of a voice when the performance has been seen through and the person performing it knows it. $631,000. Claire, I said. 16 months. Built on a structure you created 3 months before my wife was diagnosed. I heard her breathe. That is what I know, I said. And I want you to understand that I am not angry. I am past anger. What I am is completely, thoroughly done. I ended the call. I sat in my study for a long time after that. Then I picked up the phone and called Patricia. It is over, I said. She exhaled slowly. Is David okay? He will be, I said. It will take time, but he will be. And you? I looked out the window of my study at the November light coming through the oak trees in the backyard. The same trees that had been there when David was born. The same light Eleanor had loved in the late afternoons. I will be, I said. Claire Hargrove was formally charged in January with wire fraud, money laundering, and breach of fiduciary duty. The charges carried federal weight because of the offshore component. Her attorney negotiated a plea arrangement in March. The terms required full restitution of the diverted funds, which the Cayman account freeze had made possible. $614,000 was returned to the Hargrove Property Holdings estate account by the end of February. The $17,000 that had been disbursed before the freeze was partially recovered through Claire's personal assets as part of the settlement. David filed for divorce in December. He was not charged with any crime. His cooperation had been complete, and his documented ignorance of the offshore structure was supported by Gerald's forensic findings. He spent 3 months being very quiet and very present at the office and very careful with himself in the way people are careful when they have survived something they are still processing. In the spring, he came to my house on a Sunday afternoon, the same way he had come every other Sunday his entire life, and we sat on the back porch with coffee, and he said, "Dad, I need you to know something." "Tell me," I said. "I am sorry." His voice was steady and direct, not for what I did not know, for what I should have looked closer at, for trusting something because it was easier than questioning it. He looked at me. "You built everything we have with 41 years of looking closely at everything. And I stopped looking closely at the thing that mattered most." I looked at my son. "You were in love," I said. "Love makes gaps. That is not a character failure. That is being human." He nodded. "But I am looking closely now," he said. "I know you are." I said that we sat on the porch until the afternoon went long and the light went gold the way it does in Virginia in the spring. The oak trees were coming back after the winter, the same trees that had always been there. Eventually David said, "What do you think Mom would have said about all of it?" I thought about Eleanor, her steadiness, her precision, the way she had looked at people and seen them fully without announcing what she saw. She would have said, I told him, that the estate was never the point. The estate is what we built. The point is who we are inside it. David was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She was always smarter than both of us." By a considerable margin, I agreed. He laughed, genuine and warm, and the sound of something beginning to heal. I have spent a great deal of time since November thinking about what I missed and how I missed it. And the answer, every time I come back to it, is the same. I stopped looking, not because I was careless, not because I was foolish, but because I had decided, somewhere along the way, that trust meant not looking. That looking meant doubt. That doubt meant I had not built the kind of family or the kind of company where looking was necessary. That is the lie that costs people the most, not the deception from outside. The permission we give it from inside. The most sophisticated financial crimes I have ever heard of did not happen to careless people. They happened to careful people who had stopped being careful about the specific thing. Often because the person they trusted most was standing right next to them every day, making it easy not to look. But I want to leave you with this. Trust the people you love. Build the kind of family where trust is earned, honored, but do not confuse trust with the surrender of your lives. The two things are not the same. Look at the accounts. Look at the structures. Look at the numbers, not the symbols. Ask the questions that feel unnecessary. The people who have nothing to hide are not hiding questions. The ones who do will tell you everything you need to know. And if something stops your feet, even when you cannot yet explain why, do not make yourself move. Stand still. Listen. The feeling comes before the evidence, but the evidence is always there waiting to be found. I believe I was in that hallway at that exact moment because I was supposed to be. Because 41 years of building something worth protecting had taught me, without my knowing it, to hear the specific sound of something going wrong. Not everyone gets that moment. Hold your family close. Look at what you have built. And do not stop looking at it. These are my stories. And if this one stays with you, if it makes you pay a little closer attention to the people around you and the things you have worked a lifetime to build, then every word was worth writing. This has been a dad's revenge story. If it moved you, if it made you think, I would love to know what you took from it. Leave a comment below. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you have not subscribed yet, there are more stories coming that I believe you will want to hear. More stories about family, about trust, about the quiet courage of people who refuse to look away when looking away would have been so much easier. One last thing, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. That means more than I can say. Tell me in the comments, what city, what state, what country are you watching from? Every reply that comes in from somewhere new reminds me why these stories matter and why I keep telling them. A final note before we go. Some of the stories on this channel contain fictional elements crafted purely for reflection and for the lessons inside them. If that is not the kind of content you are looking for, no hard feelings at all. But if you are staying, welcome. The best family story is always the one still being written.